It is not yet known what exactly will be discussed at the meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, which has already begun. But there is information that he will also have talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte today. Mr. Kovalchuk, do you think this is connected in particular with the cancellation of this big meeting in the Ramstein format? And now the President of Ukraine wants to present the victory plan to each of the leaders personally. Well, it's clear that there was a little bit of free time during the business trip, while the President was already in Europe, so he didn't want to go back, so he has to use this time effectively. Especially since we hadn't been to Starmer's at 10 Downing Street yet. I mean, the building is familiar, but the people there are changing. That's why we had to change this plan along the way. And I think that the worst case scenario is not the worst case scenario, like going from the Balkans to Britain. It's clear that it will be postponed, the hurricane will pass, Biden will come to Europe and meet with the Germans in one way or another, in one form or another. But what is very important now is that we just don't let this hurricane get us down and do all our work. It's clear that Biden is missing, Scholz is missing, but in any case, we have to do our job. In particular, we remember that the main meeting was planned in Germany. A meeting was planned not only in the Ramstein format, at the level of the heads of the Allied countries, but also Starmer, Scholz, Macron, and the President of Ukraine were supposed to meet separately, probably, but it was supposed to be the four of them, Scholz, Macron, Starmer, and Biden. Do you think that these talks could have been about Ukraine in particular, but essentially without Ukraine? No. Let's just say that they should have been talking about Ukraine without Ukraine, but not in the sense that is often pushed in political circles, either in Ukraine or abroad, but rather about developing a common position, which means that it is clear that they wanted to play together, so they had to have a common position. In fact, the clouds were gathering, not only in the sense of a hurricane somewhere over Florida, but also in terms of not wanting to give us an invitation to NATO. Now there is an opportunity to go around to each of them individually, given that they have not all met together, and try to convince them to give us this invitation, which is really necessary for us. If the West, and I know that the West is working in a very intense mode right now, to find some kind of peaceful solution for Ukraine, but our message is that without NATO, without real guarantees, nothing will happen. So now there is a good chance to outrun our friends, literally, but let's say to gain some additional political points, and we can try to do it. If we talk about the invitation to NATO, we understand that the main decision came from the United States of America, and Germany was also seemingly against it. Do you think we will be able to shift their position now, given that some countries, members of the alliance, are already saying that they will be categorically against it, that they will block it, and so on? Well, Britain is already in favor of it. To go to France and say you already know that Germany is against it, so be in favor. To come to Germany and say that France and Britain are already in favor, so let's have you in favor, because you know that the states will be against it. And thus to put all the puzzles together, and to say to Biden, you need a political legacy. All the presidents who fought in Europe, and you fought in Europe, all ended their campaigns with victories. Ukraine's accession to NATO is not a victory on the battlefield, but a political and diplomatic victory. We don't need more missiles, we just need a political decision. Therefore, there is also room for negotiations, for maneuver, and Ukraine can take advantage of this very well. The chance now is about the same as in 2008, and then the window of opportunity will close for 10 years. So we need to take advantage of it now. Plus, when we were asked not to make demarches. We were told that by the end of the year there would be a conversation about you on NATO. And we believed it. We said, great, we're waiting. Now the end of the year is approaching, so listen. In Europe, those who don't have a war in their country are already booking some hotels for Christmas, like they're planning a vacation. We book EcoFlow and all that stuff for the New Year and Christmas. And they are already preparing for the end of the year, like they are living, waiting for discounts in stores because they are open and working. And we are waiting for what we say, you promised us by the end of the year, to talk about NATO. So now we need to push them all and say that there is no room for retreat. Let's speak honestly, speak openly, but also publicly. If you are against NATO, take these negative political points. Let all the people in the world know that you don't want to, that by doing so you are latently supporting Russia, or by doing so you are confirming that you are afraid. Ukraine is now carrying the burden of the whole of Europe. Every second, every minute, the best representatives of Ukraine are dying. But by the way, if we're not talking about NATO, a lot of Western press writes that they can offer us some other security guarantees. What do you think they could be? Because they cite the example of such guarantees by the United States to Japan, the Philippines, and whether it is possible, for example, to have the United States as a non-NATO ally with Israel. Excluding inflation, Israel has received $230 billion since the 1960s. With inflation, it will be a little difficult to count live. But we received more in a year. So to say that Israeli guarantees are very suitable for us, no. The only thing that is interesting to us is that in the Israeli case, they were given technology and domes made by the states. We would like to get this and say that this is our rocket, we invented it. But the technology is Western. The whole world has been working on it. And then you can strike without political permission. As for the Philippines, Japan, and even South Korea, it's a different story. There are bases there, and the Philippines has bases, and Japan has the U.S. military.
Ми, наприклад, готові вже наперед виділити землю в Криму, наприклад. Якщо ви нас не берете в НАТО, в Криму давайте вертати разом Крим, створити базу.
Well, without bases, these guarantees, this is all Budapest, all these promises, a lot of money, a lot of candy of all kinds, a lot of papers with many important words written on them. And then they will come to you and say, oh, we gave you guarantees. But no, it was a commitment. And, in English, there's a very big difference between the word commitment and the word guarantee. And then the speech for 20 years begins. We've heard this before, and it would be a bit primitive to lose in the 89th minute. Again, we are still negotiating with our partners. We have not yet gone to our enemies for negotiations. We are still negotiating with our own people. So no, it is clear that there can be no promises if there are no specifics. And yes, software does not work without hardware. When there is a firmly fixed formula, for example, in the form of a base, if, for example, joining NATO, or some other things that can be touched with your hands, then this is a guarantee. Without this, these are such clever, long, how can I put it, memoranda that will ultimately be worthless. That's why you definitely shouldn't fall for it, for bells and whistles, which will turn out to be unsupported. Remember, we had coupons in Kravchuk's time, or maybe it was Kushma's time, I don't remember. But this is what coupons can be. It seems to be a similar currency and perform some function, but in fact, you cannot save it for a long time because you realize that it will depreciate. Any change of power in the West multiplies all these agreements by zero. This is the first and second thing. We need to negotiate with the West, not with politicians, but with institutions. If we agree, for example, with the Ministry of Defense, we agree with the Pentagon. But this has a specific expression, a base, some other history, certain types of ships, certain types of aircraft. For example, we are told that you will have more airplanes, for example, like in non-war Greece, yes. We say yes, the Greeks have 350 F-16s and already have a few dozen on paper, but soon they will have F-35s. Greece is a good country. We say at least like Greece, there is olive oil, delicious wine, delicious bread, Greek salad, and F-35s and F-16s. Make us at least a resort like Greece. But this is a specifics. We are building 400 aircraft, 350 of which are F-16s, 50 of which are F-35s. Then it's concrete. And when they tell us to support peace, democracy, and the values we stand for, then in practice, it will be as long as it takes, and they don't even remember what it really means anymore. By the way, Mykola, does it make sense to try to negotiate with the current Biden administration now if in just a few months there will be a new president and he can essentially block everything? No. If you are invited to NATO, what will he block? Well, he will rewind the invitation. No, he will not rewind the invitation. On the contrary, we will invite the new president, set a beautiful Ukrainian table, invite him to Kyiv, and say, look, Mr. President, there is a new reality. Mrs. President, you have taken office for the first time, for the second time. It doesn't matter. We have an invitation. Let's think about what to do with this invitation. Let's materialize it and make it a full induction, for example. Or we can say that NATO has spelled out that the previous administration gave guarantees only for the Dnipro River, and that NATO's Article 6 spells it out. So let's expand it to the state border and return control of the territory to the state border. That is, it will be a new reality. It will still be an institutional decision. No one remembers when Konrad Adenauer joined NATO. Not Konrad Adenauer in West Germany, but there was an application. And then, in the 90s, they just took the second part and added it, for example. So I don't see a problem. On the contrary, there is a political window of opportunity here now. Biden needs to formalize his legacy. What was Biden about in this part of the world? How will we remember him? What movies will be made in Hollywood in 20 years? What books will be written about him? This is what needs to be described now. So this could be a good story.